While playing video games is incredibly enjoyable, sometimes you just want to sit back, grab a drink and watch a good TV show. And that brings us on to the topic of today's video. Because in my newfound quest to diversify my channel and make it more than just an average gaming channel like so many others on YouTube, I've decided to make a video that's a lot more personal to me, by talking about one of my favourite childhood TV series, Max Steel. This show followed the story of a young man named Max McGrath, and his adventures fighting different supervillains that varied from homicidal humans to dangerous aliens, all while linked to a techno-organic being known as Steel, who is an Ultralink. What is an Ultralink? Well, frankly, I think you should watch the show to find out. The driving point of the show is that Max is able to generate a very powerful energy called tachyon or turbo energy, and when combined with Steel, he is able to transform that energy and manipulate himself into amazing turbo modes, each with their own special attributes and abilities. And in this video, I'm going to be going over every single turbo mode Max was able to use throughout the whole of the show. Now, before I go on to the main part of the video, I would like to say a few things. First of all, if you haven't watched the show already, I would highly, personally recommend you do. Every single episode can be viewed on YouTube, as I've recently binge-watched the entire series after rediscovering it a few months back, and it's still as amazingly creative and original as I remember. I would also recommend you go and watch the series, as this video contains major spoilers for the show. I'll leave a link to a playlist I'll create down in the description with every episode in chronological order. There's 2 seasons, each with about 25 20-minute episodes, a 3rd season of 3 40-minute films, the first 2 of which are split into 2 parts, a 4th season with 2 40-minute films, and a 5th season with 2 40-minute films as well. Like I said, I'll create a playlist for you all so that you can go and watch the series if you want to watch the series first and avoid the spoilers in this video and come back at a later date. But seriously, I would recommend you go and check it out. It's a really original and creative show, and it's the perfect thing to watch during lockdown. Also, for those of you who have watched the show, I will only be listing the turbo modes up until Season 5, aka up to the movie Turbocharged, as during Turbocharged, Max's turbo energy goes from blue to green, meaning he can no longer link up with Steel. I know he does generate quote-unquote turbo modes with green turbo energy, but frankly I don't really count those as turbo modes, because the whole point of the turbo modes is that it's Max and Steel together. However, if you do want me to do a video listing all of the green turbo energy modes, then I will do that if you leave a comment and a like telling me you want that. Now with that out of the way, let's get on to the video. So just to clarify what exactly this video is going to be, I'm going to be going over every single turbo mode that Max and Steel generated together, where it was first featured, what episode it was first featured in, and what caused it to be activated in the first place. I would also like to point out that I'll be throwing in little bits of context here and there to keep you guys up to speed, just in case you can't be bothered to go and watch the seasons first, although I would highly recommend it, as it really is a good show. Anyway, let's get on to the very first turbo mode. As you can probably guess, the very first turbo mode premiered in the very first episode of the first season, Season 1, Episode 1, Come Together, Part 1. In this episode, Max begins to generate turbo energy for the first time, and is brought into N-Tech, a mysterious organization that deals with alien threats. It's run by his uncle, Forge Ferris. They bring him into something called a turbo chamber, which is something designed to keep his energy at bay until they figure out how to stop it. But when Max begins to overload the turbo chamber and is about to literally explode, Steel reactivates after 16 years and links with Max for the very first time, causing them to transform into their very first turbo mode, Turbo Base Mode.
This is crazy.
Crazy? You ain't seen nothing yet.
I feel amazing.
Now this mode is not that special by itself. It's got a white, blue and black colour scheme, and the only abilities it actually gives Max is enhanced strength and durability. I'd also like to point out that by this point, Steel and Max are now permanently linked and the steel suit can never be taken off. However, that will be remedied later on. The second turbo mode, Turbo Strength Mode, premieres in the same episode, when Max and Steel escape N-Tech and come up against the mighty Elementors for the very first time, dangerous Ultralinks which harness the power of the elements, in this case, fire. Realizing that Max is helplessly outgunned, Steel reacts quickly and activates Turbo Strength Mode for the very first time.
Hold on, scanning for modes. Try this on for size.
Go Turbo Strength! Look at me!
Defense Protocol X795.
Alright, Turbo Strength Mode it is.
Approximately 3 times as big as base mode and packing a punch, this turbo mode is a heavy hitter, and became one of Max's favourite turbo modes to date. As you can probably tell by the name, the main attributes of Turbo Strength Mode is that it increases Max's physical strength tenfold, and for a while remained his most powerful mode. It features the same white, black and blue designs as the base mode, but with a smaller head, obviously bigger arms, and still attaining the steel chestplate icon, signifying that Steel is still within Max's suit. Max has used Turbo Strength Mode probably more than any other mode in his entire arsenal, once again probably due to the fact that for a long time it was his most powerful and effective mode for dealing with enemies, as nothing really beats a big punch to the face. The third turbo mode premiered in the next episode, Season 1 Episode 2 Come Together Part 2. Max and Steel are launched into the air, and when they're about to hit the ground in what would have been fatal, probably even in the Steel suit, Steel quickly digs through his memory files and finds Turbo Flight Mode.
Working on it.
Since when can we fly?
Who knows? But I like it.
Me too.
Which, as you can probably guess by the name, gives Max the ability to fly, through wings on his back and a turbo-powered rocket booster. For a while, this became Max's primary source of transportation, as it could get him anywhere much faster than either a car or Turbo Strength or Base Mode, and just like Turbo Strength Mode, was one of his most popular modes. Max's fourth turbo mode is actually one that a lot of people forget, but Turbo Camo Mode was introduced in the same episode as Turbo Flight Mode. As stated before, once Max and Steel were linked, there is no way to get the Steel suit off of Max's body. Although frankly I don't think Max would ever actually want to unlink with Steel, as if that ever did happen, his turbo energy would rip his body apart. But given that the Steel suit was bound to his body permanently, that presented him with a bit of a problem regarding the people who didn't know he was a superhero. So, overnight, Steel rigged up Camouflage Mode, which is a mode that renders most of the Steel suit completely invisible and replaces it with Max's everyday attire.
Camouflage Mode.
That's what I just said.
And you didn't mention this yesterday because?
You didn't ask. Ooh, my mistake. This was an outfit from your mother's closet.
Whoa, what were you doing in my mother's... Whoa.
Not bad if I do say so myself.
Now that I think about it, this is actually the mode that is used most in the entirety of the show, as whenever Max isn't fighting bad guys, he's in this mode. And while it provides no special attributes itself, Steel does remind Max on multiple occasions that the steel suit is completely functional even in camo mode, meaning that it can protect him from several things such as intense heat or poisonous gases. After episode 2, we had to wait 5 more episodes to get a new turbo mode, but in hard water, Max and Steel were faced with another of the elementals, this time water. This prompted Steel to create a brand new turbo mode, Turbo Scuba Mode.
New plan. We swim back to shore, rent a new boat, and...
Actually, I have a better idea.
Whoa. Since when do we have a scuba mode? And how come you didn't use it back at the shuttle launch?
It was that little incident that prompted me to scan for this mode. Of course, if you don't like it, I can revert back to...
No, I like it.
Which was actually one of the least used modes in the entire series. Now this wasn't because it was particularly bad, per se, but mainly the fact that on land it was basically useless, as was seen in a later episode of Season 2. But underwater, Turbo Scuba Mode was basically the only accessible mode by Max, as none of his other modes allowed him to breathe underwater, or even move at intense speeds for that matter. Scuba Mode itself didn't feature a lot of special abilities, but it did have a turbo-fueled rocket booster on the back, much the same as Turbo Flight Mode, which did come in handy at some points. Turbo Scuba Mode looked a little different than a lot of the other turbo modes, with a slightly different shaped head, hints of yellow, and obviously, you gotta have flippers. 4 episodes later, in Season 1 Episode 11 titled Supermania, we got the first double turbo mode introduction since Episode 2. In this episode, Steel became obsessed with cheesy superhero movies, and overnight fabricated 2 brand new turbo modes. The latter turbo mode, Turbo Super Strength Mode, wasn't actually that big of a difference from the original Strength Mode, except that it featured a pair of cliché purple superhero underpants.
What are we doing? Give me back control.
Go, Turbo! Super strength!
This isn't funny.
Steel smash!
Steel, you have no idea what you're doing.
Turbo Super Flight, however, was every superhero cliché packed into one.
Let's do this.
Right.
Go!
Go, Turbo!
Huh?
Super flight!
What is this?
It's our new look. Sweet abs, huh?
Turn us back, we look ridiculous.
We look awesome! Ascend! Ascend and depart!
Stylish gloves and boots, unnecessary outside underpants, a transparent visor, and a cape that was frozen going backwards, to make it look like they were always flying. Steel basically forced Max to stay in this mode for the entirety of the episode, making him incredibly embarrassed, especially due to the fact that he had, and I quote, 20 abs.
Sorry, Max. It's just... How many abs do you have there? Like 20?
I didn't know that was anatomically possible.
You know, I had fond memories of reading comic books as a kid. You just ruined that for me.
While Turbo Super Strength Mode was an episode exclusive, Turbo Super Mode did actually return in a later episode of Season 2. Season 2, Episode 8, Ultralink Hunter. During this episode, Max and Steel had a bit of a falling out, causing Steel to embarrass Max by turning them into Turbo Super Flight Mode again. Unfortunately, when Steel was captured by a dangerous intergalactic bounty hunter, yeah, they exist in this show, Max was locked in Turbo Super Mode, unable to change into another mode without Steel. It was also during this episode that they expanded on Turbo Super Mode a little bit, revealing that through the use of some cliché power words such as wham, the mode was able to gain special abilities, such as laser vision and super punches. However, this episode would be the last time that Turbo Super Flight Mode had a main part in an episode, and frankly, I think it's for the best. 3 episodes later, in Season 1 Episode 14, the mighty elementors, being fire, earth, water and air, merged together in a freak accident involving one of Entech's security devices, causing them to have the power of all the elements at once. This was a 2-parter, and in part 1 of Elements of Surprise, Berto, the head scientific officer over at Entech, pointed out that Max and Steel really were lacking in terms of speed, foreshadowing the inclusion of a brand new turbo mode. Turbo Speed Mode.
Okay, what's the plan?
The plan is to pick up the pace with a new mode, Speed Mode.
Okay. Hope you know what you're doing.
Me too. Go Turbo! Speed!
Well, I like the outfit. And I love the moves!
This was introduced when Max and Steel were completely outgunned by Mega Elementor's powers, which, as I previously stated, involved the use of every element in one body. The introduction of Turbo Speed Mode allowed Max and Steel to outwit their opponent by unwittingly using their own powers against them, freezing them solid. Turbo Speed Mode looks slightly different than a lot of the other Turbo modes, featuring a curved, pointed head and more white on the body than most of the other Turbo modes. 4 episodes later, in Season 1 Episode 18, Scrambled, Steel went crazy given that Entech hadn't told him anything about who he was or where Ultralinks come from, much less what their purpose was. So, in desperation, he went to seek help from the one person he was certain was not going to willingly give it to him, Extroyer. For those of you who haven't watched the series, Extroyer is my personal favourite villain of the entire show. He was once a man, just like you and me, named Troy Winter, and worked for Dredd, who was another main villain of the show. During the episode he debuted in, which was Season 1 Episode 8, The Thrill of the Hunt, he worked to steal an Ultralink, yes, that's right, another Ultralink just like Steel, from Entech, who had kept it a secret from Max and Steel for unknown reasons. He then tried to steal it from Dredd, who was the one who originally wanted it. However, Dredd anticipated this betrayal and planted a bomb inside the Ultralink case. He had intended the Ultralink to blow up and kill Troy, but instead it prematurely activated the Ultralink's linking abilities. But thanks to the fact that it was already damaged, it didn't link with him properly and ended up encrusted on his chest. But instead of giving him the ability to turn into different turbo modes like Max and Steel, which technically wouldn't happen anyway seeing as Troy didn't have any turbo energy to begin with, it gave him the ability to extract the DNA of animals and turn into monstrous versions of them. But as you've probably guessed by now, Steel's only reason for going to find Extroyer was that he knew if he was able to interface with the Ultralink encrusted on his chest, he may finally be able to get some answers. And he was right. After stunning Extroyer temporarily, he touched the Ultralink on his chest and was gifted some important memories. During the flashbacks of the Ultralink's memories, he saw a Max Steel lookalike in space use a new mode that he'd previously never seen before, Turbo Stealth Mode. I would also like to point out that this is the first time we see the Turbo Base Mode of this mysterious Max Steel lookalike. I'll mention that a little bit later, but I'd just like to point out that this is the first time we see it. It looks somewhat similar to Max's base mode, although the helmet does look quite a bit different. Anyway, after Steel is repaired by Berto after being scrambled, haha, by Extroyer's Ultralink, he reunites with Max and reveals to him the turbo mode he learned from the memory. They activate it and royally kick Extroyer's butt.
I can't get him!
Use turbo stealth.
What? Turbo stealth only works for the turbo car.
No, we used it when we took down that spaceship.
Spaceship? Wow, you really did get your circuit scrambled.
Look, I'll show you. Check this out. Go turbo stealth.
Sweet!
Turbo stealth mode renders them completely invisible, but it is important to note that they don't have to remain that way. Turbo stealth mode has a non-stealth mode, ironically enough, and it's basically a copy of the base mode, except instead of white, it's completely black and blue, and frankly I like the design of this one. It also has a line through the visor, although that design choice is a bit weird for me, but anyway, Turbo Stealth Mode, amazing mode. Max and Steel's 10th mode premiered in Season 1 Episode 22, Split Decisions. The main gist of this episode was that the combined Elementors had been fighting over control of their combined body. Air Elementor, undoubtedly the strongest and most intelligent of the original Elementors, revealed to his brothers that he possessed a device that usually would destroy Ultralinks. However, considering that they themselves had merged together, this device would allow them to separate once more, retaining their original bodies. The other Elementors complained, asking why he didn't reveal this earlier. But Air Elementor explains that together they are more powerful than any of them are alone, but only when they combine their powers and work together. He explained that his plan was to separate them, and whoever got to Max Steel first and took him down would be the one to call the shots. He activated the device, and the 4 Elementals went their separate ways once more. Unfortunately, this was the very same episode that Max and Steel decided to try something rather risky. Once again angry at never being told anything, Steel decides that it's time to get someone to tell them exactly what's going on. Someone who works at Entech. Berto is by far the most trusting of the two, and the closest friend, so Steel decides to hypnotize him in order to get him to tell them some answers. Berto then spends the entire rest of the episode wandering around, asking himself the question,
Where do Ultralinks come from?
which is ironic considering it's explained at the end that Berto doesn't have top secret clearance, meaning ironically he doesn't actually know the answer to the question Steel implanted in his brain. However, that doesn't stop him from revealing a previously unknown turbo mode to Max and Steel, called Turbo Cannon Mode.
Turbo Cannon!
What? Watch out!
Initiate Turbo Cannon mode! Steel, you have any idea what he's talking about?
Nope. But given our predicament,
Hellish! Entech slugs!
I'd say it's worth a shot.
Go Turbo Cannon! Whoa! What does it do?
Charge it up and see.
This turbo mode may have been the heaviest Max had ever seen, but it was undoubtedly at that point his strongest to date. Turbo Cannon mode featured an incredibly stocky build, with gigantic pads along his arms and legs, and a gigantic pod encasing his normal suit. What made Turbo Cannon mode so powerful, however, was that it gave Max the ability to put his turbo energy into the mode itself, and propel himself forward in a turbo cannonball. The drawback of this was, not only was the mode incredibly slow while not in cannonball mode, generating the turbo cannonball took a lot of Max's turbo energy, and he could only use it 2 or 3 times before having to recharge. However, this put an end to all 4 of the Elementors' pursuit, and the 4 of them realized that together, they are stronger, and that their hate for each other is outbalanced by their hate for Max Steel. So the four of them decided to merge together once more and became Mega Elemental again. The last turbo mode introduced in Season 1 premiered in the very next episode from Turbo Cannon mode, Season 1 Episode 23, Pick Your Poison. The gist of this episode was that Entek and Max had both spent the past couple of weeks getting their rear ends completely battered by Mega Elementor, seen as the four Elementors had put aside their differences and started working together. While they get Toxon, another main villain of the show, to figure out a formula to permanently disable Elementor, Steel reveals to Max that during their last couple of encounters of getting royally butt-kicked, he's developed a brand new turbo mode to aid them. They transform into it for the very first time, and at first, it sort of seems like he's not changed at all. He's just gone to base mode, but with a little bit of light blue. However, when Max looks around, he realizes he's surrounded by clones of himself, earning the mode the name Turbo Clone Mode.
And what's to stop him from crushing us like a bug?
A new turbo mode. After our last run-in, I figured we could use one.
I'll say. How's it work?
Perhaps it's best I just show you.
What? You call this a new mode? I look almost exactly... What?
Yes, exactly the same. 3 times over.
What?
I call it Turbo Clone Mode.
And I call it awesome!
This mode, as its name suggests, allows Max to use his excess turbo energy to generate clones of himself. These clones are actually perfectly capable of attacking his enemies. However, they're not exactly as durable as the hero we all know and love, and usually only take one single punch before they're knocked out for good. This mode, like Turbo Cannon mode, was extremely costly in terms of turbo energy, and required immense concentration, but when used right, could easily overwhelm enemies or allow Max a quick getaway. I'd also like to point out that Turbo Clone Mode wasn't restricted to copying Max's base mode. Max could activate Turbo Clone Mode during any other mode, meaning that if he was soaring through the skies as Turbo Flight Mode, or pummeling into the ground in Turbo Cannon Mode, he could activate Turbo Clone Mode and clone himself in those modes, making it quite an effective mode. And with that, Season 1 was over. And just for a bit of context, the final episode of the season was a very big reveal, revealing to the audience, Max and Steel, the true purpose and nature of the Ultralinks. And for the very first time, we got to see more than one functional Ultralink apart from Steel. In fact, we saw quite a few. It was revealed that the true nature of the Ultralinks is to attach to, link with, and weaponize anything they came across. This is different from what Steel does, as Steel didn't weaponize Max, simply link with him and controlled his turbo energy. These Ultralinks link with different items and turn them into weapons. It is also revealed in this episode that the mysterious Max Steel lookalike that Steel saw in Extroyer's Ultralink's memories actually turned out to be Max's dad. And for a little bit more context, Max's dad is the one who first discovered turbo energy and Steel. Up until this point, the viewers were told that he was just a scientist, and that he died in an accident regarding turbo energy. However, it's revealed in this final episode that he was the other Max Steel, making the turbo base mode that we saw in the flashback belonging to him. I know I said at the beginning of the episode that I was only listing Max's turbo modes, but I'll be listing his father's as well, and there'll be an explanation for that later in the video. Oh, and by the way, Forge kinda gets his arm eaten off by an Ultralink. Yeah. Anyway, on to Season 2. During Season 2, the dynamic had changed completely. Max and Steel weren't just dealing with enemies like Dread or Extroyer anymore, who they could easily beat on their best days. This time, they were dealing with a far greater enemy. It turns out the Ultralinks were all serving under one master, Makino, a diabolical intergalactic tyrant whose mere purpose in life is to absorb and expand with the help of his Ultralink army, and the Alpha Link, a giant planet-sized warship capable of absorbing planets themselves. The whole plotline of the second season was that Makino was coming to Earth, and they needed to prepare for when he arrived. Now, in comparison to the first season, which gave us a whopping 11 turbo modes, Season 2 was pretty lackluster, only giving us 4, one of which was only used on a few rare occasions. I get that you don't want to overwhelm us with the amount of turbo modes that Max has, but trust me, that'll be remedied later anyway. But I would have thought that Season 2 would have introduced a few more than that. Anyway, let's get on to Season 2. Funnily enough, we had to wait 8 episodes into the first season to get a brand new turbo mode, and if you remember from earlier, that's the same episode that Turbo Superflight got another appearance. As I stated earlier, in this episode, Steel is captured by an intergalactic Ultralink hunter named Vengan, who later turns to the side of good to help Max and Steel face Makino. As stated before, without Steel to interface with him, Max is stuck in whatever turbo mode he's currently in, meaning that for the majority of the episode, he's stuck in Turbo Super Flight mode. However, when the two finally reunite on one of Makino's ships, the two unlock a brand new turbo mode that's actually pretty unique, because this turbo mode doesn't actually affect Max, it affects Steel. This is number 12, Turbo Mimic Mode.
You're so in the zone!
Whoa! There it is again! Biometric data indicates we just hit critical mass and unlocked Turbo Mimic Mode? Right! I can create my own versions of your turbo modes!
Copycat mode! Gotcha!
So, are we good?
Hey, Steel, I don't hold grudges. And that's another. Steel, let's tag team these freaks! Go Turbo! Mimic!
Super!
Steel, again?
What? I like this look. Sweet!
This mode was actually only used a few times, which is surprising seeing as it's actually a pretty interesting mode. But what it does is it allows Steel to mimic the abilities of Max's modes, as by himself, all he can really do is shoot a few lasers out of his arms, which, against the majority of the Max Steel villains, are actually pretty ineffective. But in the episode, we've seen him combining into different modes such as Turbo Super Flight, which is his personal favourite, Turbo Strength, and even Turbo Cannon mode. Oh, look at him, a little turbified cannonball. Unfortunately, as I've stated before, this mode was hardly used at all, although it's pretty insignificant compared to the majority of Max's other modes, and considering they're together most of the time anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's also important to note, for context sake, that in the first 8 episodes of the season, a brand new elemental emerged. This one was not actually an Ultralink, but a Megalink, which is a much more powerful Ultralink with a metal body, a lot more power, and one with much higher ranking in the Makino army. This specific Megalink was named Metalak, and was actually Makino's right-hand Megalink, communicating with him from far away. Metalak was stationed at Earth with the Elementors and a few other Ultralinks, while Makino and his Alpha Link neared Earth day by day. Eventually, Metalak grew tired of Elementor's continuous failures to destroy Max Steel, so he took it upon himself to lead the armies. He sent himself to Earth and megalinked with a metal samurai atop a pyramid, turning himself into the 5th Elementor, Metal Elementor. He proved to be the most powerful and most intelligent Elementor that Max and Steel had ever faced. He remained in his singular body for a few episodes, commanding the Ultralinks that attacked Max and Steel. The reason I'm saying this is that during Season 2 Episode 8, when Turbo Mimic Mode was introduced, Metal Elementor deliberately sets up Mega Elementor to fail, just so that he can destroy him. However, at the end of the episode, he decides not to destroy him, but instead to absorb him, because as a Megalink, he has that power. And so the 4 Elementors become 5, turning into Mega Metal Elementor, a true monstrosity probably belonging more to Five Nights at Freddy's. Moving on to Season 2 Episode 11, which is one of my personal favourite episodes, we get introduced to another very unique turbo mode. During the episode, Max and his friends, plus Berto, take a vacation to a tropical island. Unfortunately, Steel unlinks with Max to go and spend some time with a female AI. Yep, Steel be simping. Meaning that Max's turbo energy dampeners are off, meaning that Mega Elementor can track him. So that inevitably leads Mega Metal Elementor and the rest of the Ultralinks to go to the tropical island and ruin their vacation. However, when Steel is spending some quality time with TJ, the female AI programmed into their turbojet, the heat of the island's volcano reminds him of a previous turbo mode that he'd forgotten. He links up with Max, and together the two of them turn into one of Max's most unique and most powerful turbo modes to date, Turbo Heat Mode.
Max, I just remembered the mode. It's Turbo Heat Mode.
Nice! We could use a little firepower. Go Turbo! Heat! Hot new mode! But someone forgot to build hands.
And it couldn't have come at a better time, as Mega Metal Elementor turns the entire island to ice. Turbo Heat Mode is an incredibly bulky mode and is lacking hands. In its place are 2 flamethrowers. Yes, turbo flamethrowers. It's amazing. Turbo Heat Mode includes yellow hints as well as the blue, white and black of other modes, and is definitely Max's largest mode, even bigger than Turbo Cannon Mode. Another drawback of Turbo Heat Mode is that it takes a lot of turbo energy to generate the flames, making it an even bigger turbo hog than Turbo Cannon Mode. Luckily, unlike Turbo Mimic Mode, Turbo Heat Mode is a mode that recurs for the rest of the season, and for one, I'm glad for it. Now while we're going over Season 2, I would like to bring up Episode 13, The Legend of JM Micro. Now, while no new turbo modes are introduced in this episode, it's important to note that a very big thing happens in this episode, and for context purposes, it's important that I show it you. In this episode, Steel is infected with a virus thanks to another Ultralink, one that is gradually shutting down his system. During the virus, his systems are repeating the same name over and over again, JM Micro. Steel and Max have no idea who this person is, but luckily this time, Max's uncle and mum finally decide to tell him something, and this something is a pretty major something. If I haven't stated already, Max's dad's name is Jim McGrath, but it's in this episode that we learn something pretty major. Jim McGrath's real name is JM Micro, and it actually turns out that the reason Jim was able to generate turbo energy, meaning Max could as well, is because he's an alien humanoid from the planet Tachyon, hence the name Tachyon Energy. This means that Max is actually half alien, which is why he's angry with her in the next couple of episodes. However, another reason why I brought up this episode is it's the first time we actually see Max's dad's base turbo mode, and not like the flashback that we got in Season 1. No, this time we actually see it, And like I said before, it's pretty standard and pretty similar to Max's modes, apart from the fact that it has a very different helmet. Max's dad also had a great deal of other turbo modes, but I'll be covering them later on in the video.
This warrior is powerful. Absorb and expand! Absorb and expand!
Wait! Why are you attacking us? What did we ever do to you?
We are programmed to absorb and expand for the glory of Mackinac.
All this destruction for glory? Is the annihilation of innocent lives, is that glory?
No, I'm not like that. It doesn't compute. None of it. But what can one Ultralisk do against such reckless hate? No, this warrior must live.
What did you just do?
I Ultralinked with you to save your life. My name is Embaro Axtil X377.
J.M. Mikra.
The next turbo mode came 4 episodes later, during the second part of a 2-parter named Mackinac Strikes. Seeing as I haven't mentioned this already, it's important to note that Dredd, the main antagonist of the first season, is actually working with Mackinac, although secretly, he wants to destroy him, using a special turbo-powered weapon called the Turbo Star. The Turbo Star is actually the reason for Max's father's death, as during a Turbo Star test, Dredd sabotaged the experiment, causing the cipher he invented to drain turbo energy to become permanently embedded in his chest. However, he got the easy deal, as the explosion ended up killing Max's dad. As well as the plotline of Season 2 being the fact that Mackinac is coming, over the episodes, Max and Steel gradually discover the Turbo Star pieces and try to put it back together again, in the hopes that, even though it ended up killing his father, it's exactly what they need to defeat Mackinac. Unfortunately, in this episode, Mackinac declares to Mega Metal Elementor and Dredd that using a special wormhole device, he's able to come forth sooner than expected, and teleports directly to Earth. Facing off against Mackinac, Max and Steel realise that he is a lot more powerful than they originally anticipated, and kicks their arses royally. During a raid with Mega Metal Elementor and an Ultralinked Forge, they blow up N-Tech and make a run for it. Max's mom is presumed dead in the first part, but luckily, she's alive. You know, we don't kill protagonist mothers. We're not Land Before Time. Unfortunately, Mackinac manages to capture Steel, meaning that Max is locked in his base turbo mode. But when he finds out that his mom is still alive, they embrace, and she tells him a special alpha code that he's to tell Steel when they finally reunite. When that eventually happens aboard Mackinac's ship, Max and Steel are sent into Steel's mind. Again, like, what's with this? And get a message from Max's dad. During this time, all of the memories restored by the alpha code also restore a brand new turbo mode. Turbo Rocket Mode.
Turbo mode download complete.
Unlocking turbo mode. Turbo rocket mode.
Turbo what mode?
Go turbo rocket mode.
Somebody's in trouble.
You are still but an insignificant cipher of nothing!
Wrong. I am the son of Mikra.
Turbo Rocket Mode is the third of Max's 14 turbo modes to be able to fly, below Turbo Flight Mode and Turbo Super Flight Mode. But unlike those two modes, it can turn the rockets into cannons that shoot pure powered turbo energy. And using this incredibly badass mode, they send Mackinac packing, flying back through the portal and forcing him to resume his journey the long way. Turbo Rocket Mode features a lot more black than the other modes, as well as the white and blue. The helmet is shaped differently with a large visor over the top, as this mode was most likely designed for space travel. This mode was used semi-often, mainly due to the fact that Max never really needed it a lot, and it did take up vast amounts of turbo energy. But hey, it was a pretty badass gift from Max's deceased father. 4 episodes after the introduction of Turbo Rocket mode, Max acquired the last turbo mode in Season 2. During this episode, him and his friends are on a Halloween school trip to a museum, and they all sneak off to have some Halloween themed fun. Unfortunately, it's at this point that 2 stealth Ultralinks are sent to the same location, in order to locate and retrieve a mysterious source of turbo energy, which, funnily enough, doesn't actually belong to Max. Max and Steel do find this source, however, and it turns out to be a rock from the planet Tachyon, his father's home planet. The Ultralinks link with some glitchy Reaper holograms, causing them to become literal ghosts. Yeah, it's Halloween, what are you gonna do? After playing a few games of hide and seek with his friends, Max and Steel go looking for the Turbo Rock again, and when they find it, it unlocks a brand new turbo mode for Steel, and while in a heated confrontation with the Reapers, they activate their 15th mode, Turbo Spike mode, for the very first time.
This looks like a good time to try out our new turbo mode. It's called Turbo Spike mode.
Got it. Let's go turbo! Spike!
You can't hide from me!
Boo! Who are you gonna call?
This mode looks very different to anything Max and Steel have been able to generate before, featuring an almost completely black design, gigantic blue turbo spikes sticking out of almost every part of his body, a small angular head, and the main ability of Turbo Spike mode, the extendable whips with turbo spikes on the end. This mode was intended for stealth, as Max and Steel use it to hide in the shadows, swinging around like Spider-Man. Turbo Spike mode is definitely one of my favourite turbo modes due to the fact that it's so unique. The Turbo Spike whips can be used in a lot of different circumstances, as whips, as javelins, as ropes, as really anything that Max needs them to be. And for that, it's one of my favourites. With an arsenal of a whopping 15 different turbo modes, Max and Steel were finally ready to face Makino. And it's a good job too, because in the 2-part Season 2 finale, Makino finally arrives. Having completed the Turbo Star by now, Max's mother and uncle begrudgingly agree to let him use it, despite the fact that they're both nervous that what happened to his father could easily happen to him. And, funnily enough, it actually does. But it's in this episode that we get another big reveal, and once again I can't stress enough, you should go and watch the series before watching this video. But we actually learn that the explosion caused by the Turbo Star malfunctioning does not actually kill the user, and in fact teleports them a great distance away, meaning that our old pal, Max's father Jim, is alive. And his turbo energy is what's fueling Makino's ship. Together, the two of them combine their energies and finally put an end to Makino. Or so we thought. So that's the end of Season 2, and unfortunately, the end of the episodes. But hey, don't worry, the 3 40-minute movies of Season 3 have got plenty of turbo modes to give us. I had originally intended to do all of this in one video, but considering the time we're on already, I think it's best that I put it into 2 parts. So, if you did enjoy this video, make sure to leave a like and comment down below what was your favourite turbo mode of Seasons 1 and 2. And don't worry, the Season 3 movies give us plenty more turbo modes, and they're only going to get cooler from here. And hey, even the Season 4 movies give us a few new ones, even though they're really not as good. But anyway, I really hope you did enjoy this video. If you did, leave a like, leave a comment, and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this. And check out my other videos. I usually do gaming videos, but I'm trying to branch out. So thanks a lot for watching, everyone, and I will see you on another video very, very soon. Goodbye, everyone.